Welcome back to another episode of Sarah's Grand Adventures. I'm Sarah, the creative explorer behind this account. Apologies for the absence for the last 2 weeks. I've had a couple of really busy weeks and I just could not get it together for this episode, but I'm really excited to be here for this one because I am talking about my top 5 bucket list items. Now I want to preface this video by saying that almost all of the countries in the world are on my bucket list. So it was actually really hard to narrow it down to the top 5. And I could not pick an order, so I'm going to say these being the top 5, but they're not in any particular order, so I don't have like a number 1 currently, because earlier this year, the number 1 that was on my list was Greece. And I did go to it earlier in March. So yes, these are my top 5, but not in any particular order. Most countries are on my bucket list, but I picked these top 5 because of particular attractions or landmarks that I really wanted to see, that intrigue me, and that come with really great stories. So why don't we get going? My number 1 pick for today, not number 1 on my bucket list, but the first one I'm going to tell you is Italy. So I always thought of Greece and Italy as like connected. Whenever you hear people talk about them, you always hear Greece and Italy together. And so with Greece being on my bucket list, Italy was also high up there. There are many really cool parts of Italy. My in-laws actually went there last fall, and brought me back some amazing postcards, because I actually have quite an obsession with collecting postcards. So pretty much anytime I have a friend go away, I ask them to bring me back some postcards. So they traveled all over the country and had some amazing stories. And personally, I don't drink alcohol. So part of what they loved was traveling around to all the different wineries, and trying different wines with their meals. And that's amazing. And I know Italy is really known for that, but in my head, what's really cool, and it's something that I just would love to do, is go around to all these different locations, and sit in absolutely beautiful cafes or restaurants with incredible views, drinking some beverages and having just the most amazing food. I would actually start drinking coffee again to do that, because coffee in Italy just sounds so amazing. I watched the movie, what was it called? Letters to Juliet. And there is this scene in the movie where they're having breakfast at like a hotel that they're staying at, and just like the scenery it blows my mind. So that's what I envision when I envision Italy. But my favorite thing to do when I travel anywhere, and what I really look for, is I love architecture. And I especially love historic architecture. So, those incredible like monuments and buildings and big sites that come with the most amazing historic stories. Was my favorite thing to do during our trip to Greece earlier this year. We got one of those passes that allowed us to see all the major sites in Athens. And so obviously Italy also has some incredible architecture. And so that's big on my list. I can't narrow it down. Obviously, like the Colosseum would be a big one. But there are just so many incredible historic architecture and sites that I would really love to see. Number 2 on my list is Kenya. I would love to go to Kenya. I became obsessed when I follow the Bucketlist family, and I absolutely love them. And they show me some of like my bucket list items. They fill up my bucket list really. But a couple of years ago, they did an African safari with their kids in the summer, And one of the places that they went was Kenya, and they stayed at the Giraffe Manor. And after I watched their YouTube video, I just devoured the video. I became obsessed with the Giraffe Manor. Now, every time somebody tells me they're going to Kenya or they're going to Africa, I'm like, you have to go to the Giraffe Manor. And one day I will get there too. So my in-laws are actually going to Africa this month. And I got them to put the Giraffe Manor on their to-do list. So they are going to go see it. What I think is really cool, so you can actually go to the Giraffe Manor and visit with the giraffes. So the giraffes live there, so you can visit with them. You can pet them. There's lots that you can do there, but what is really neat and definitely high on my bucket list is to actually stay at the Giraffe Manor, because you can have breakfast with there. And what they do is they open up the windows, and you have like your plate of food, and then there is a plate for the giraffes, and the giraffes actually lean their heads in through the windows and they have breakfast with you. If you follow the Giraffe Manor on Instagram, you'll see so many incredible photos of people having breakfast with giraffes, as the giraffes' heads are like right in the windows and they're like right next to their faces. That is hot. If I was to pick like my next biggest one, the Giraffe Manor would probably be on that list. And I don't even care how much it costs. I mean, I do, but like if I were to go, it's a while away, but if I were to go, I would want to stay there. And I know that it's probably quite pricey to stay, but I think it's not as much just to visit. Item number 3 is Iceland. So when the show first came out, oh gosh, when did it come out? 2020 maybe? The show Down to Earth on Netflix with Zac Efron and Darren O'Leen. I absolutely loved that show. And in the first episode, the two of them go to Iceland and they do some amazing things. It's a really informative episode and a really great show. I highly recommend it. They go around to different countries looking for solutions to climate change and environmentalism. And then the first episode, they go to Iceland, and some of the cool things that they do, like right at the beginning of the episode, we see that they actually get to make and cook food by putting it into the ground, into the like volcanic ground. And the next day it's ready and they have like bread and eggs, and it's just so neat. And so that would be high on my bucket list. I don't know if that's actually something you can do or if they just did it for the show, but it was really cool. And obviously another great thing about Iceland is the Blue Lagoon. So that is definitely on my bucket list to do. But really, the number one thing that I would be most excited about for Iceland is that bridge between the two continents. So if you don't know, Iceland actually is on 2 separate continents, and there is a bridge that takes you across. So in the show, Zach and Darren stand on each side, and so the two of them are talking to each other from 2 different continents. And what you could do if you're really brave, which my in-laws actually did do earlier this year, is you can get dressed up in wetsuits and you can go into the water, and then they'll position you in a place where you're actually straddling and touching 2 different continents. And I just think that's such a cool concept, cool feature. There's many really wonderful things to do in Iceland, but that one, after watching the show, I just have not been able to get it out of my head. I absolutely want to go and see, stand, touch 2 different continents. So that's why Iceland is high on my bucket list. Number 4. So my number 4th one is New Zealand, and that is because it's not a secret, I will admit it, I'm a huge nerd. I love fantasy. And so if you don't know, the movies for the Lord of the Rings series were filmed in New Zealand. I have read the books, I have watched the movies, including the extended editions, which by the way is a marathon to watch, but highly recommend. And what's really neat is you can actually go to the movie set and you can take tours. So there's actually, upon a Google inspection, there's many tours. Some are just walking tours that look to be around like 90 New Zealand, whatever their currency is. And they, there's obviously more elaborate ones. There's cave ones. But the one that I really had my eye on is there's one that's more around dusk. So you can go and tour the movie set of Hobbiton, and it actually ends with a banquet, just like, they would in the movies. And I think that would be the tour that I would pick. But there are lots of really wonderful tours. So if you're going to New Zealand and you love fantasy as well, I highly recommend this tour. I had some friends who went there a couple of years ago and they did the tour and they absolutely loved it. So this has got to be high on your bucket list. Something you can also do is close to the movie set, there's actually hobbit holes that you can stay in as if you're staying in like a hotel or an Airbnb. You can stay in the hobbit holes. And so that would definitely be what I would do, is I would take that tour, including the banquet, and then I would stay the night in a hobbit hole. And that would just make my nerdy little fantasy brain really, really happy. And finally, number 5 is Greece. And I know I told you I already went to Greece earlier this year and it was amazing, but specifically I would like to go back and I would like to go to more islands. So what we did and what we realized is kind of a mistake, because we actually spent most of our time in Athens, and I would not recommend this. So we did go to Santorini. That was the only island we went to, because 100% of people that we talked to when we said we were going to Greece said we had to go to Santorini. And I already had wanted to go because it was high on my bucket list. Obviously it was number 1, as I mentioned earlier, after I watched The Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants when I was 14 maybe, a teenager for sure. And so we went, and I was really looking forward to trying to find some of the filming locations in Santorini. But we didn't really get to go on the other islands. Like I said, we booked in for most of our time in Athens, and we sort of ran out of things to do. There are a lot of like bigger attractions that you can go to, like the Acropolis. That took us probably all day. We actually went to the Acropolis twice. The first time it took us most of the day. And we did get a 5-day pass to see the other attractions, which I definitely recommend doing instead of paying individually. But it was great, except, 2 weeks or 2.5 weeks in Athens was too much. So if I were to go again, I would want to go to different islands. And I have many that are on my list, but I really would like to spend some time in both like the major islands and, some of the more minor ones that you don't hear about all the time. When we went to Santorini, it was honestly the perfect time to go. Everyone said Santorini is going to be busy, full of tourists, but we went to Greece and it was the end of March to the beginning of April. And so we were actually in Santorini the last few days of March, which was the perfect time to go. So their tourist season starts, their early tourist season starts on April 1st. So we were there just a couple days before. So most of the restaurants had opened back up because over the winter they closed them down because there's not as many tourists. So most of the restaurants had opened back up, and there honestly wasn't that many tourists there. We also happened to be there during their like Independence Day holiday, so we got to see a fun parade, and that was really cool. But yeah, it wasn't like, there just wasn't very many tourists. So we stayed in cave homes in Santorini, and our Airbnb host, she actually upgraded our room to like a bigger, more luxurious room, just because there wasn't anybody there. So yeah, we were some of the few tourists that were actually there. And yeah, it was awesome. Like the restaurants were were quiet, which meant that we had exceptional service wherever we went, because there was a few restaurants where it was only us in the restaurant. But I would like to go to other islands. So, gosh, I list off a few that I want to go to, but realistically, I want to go to them all. Crete is probably number one on my list since I've now been to Santorini. Earlier this year, I read the book Circe and became really obsessed with Crete. And I was really sad that we didn't get to go when we were in Greece in March, but it just didn't work out timing-wise. So Crete is definitely number one. Mykonos is also on there. That's just like, you gotta go. But some of the smaller islands like Naxos and Paros, Milos, like a lot of them are on my list. So I would like to go to all of the islands. And I get most of my recommendations from a couple of accounts on Instagram. My two favorite accounts that I follow are the Ginger Wanderlust. I really like her posts. She makes everything really fun, but she also shows you a lot of like how she edits her photos and edits her videos, and then how to get really incredible like photos and videos while you're traveling. So different like tips and tricks, and so that's really cool. Another account that I really love to follow is Amanda Monique Brown. I really like her traveling the world cost per day in different cities and countries. So that's how I can get, I get really good bucket list tips from her of where to go, and how to travel on a budget, or just make sure you're maximizing your money as you travel. So I love those two accounts. And those are my top 5 bucket list items currently. Like I said, almost all of the countries that I know are pretty much on my bucket list. There are many that I don't know that I've never heard of, I'm sure, because there are lots of countries in the world, but I would be hard pressed to find one that I wasn't interested in going to. But those are my top 5 just because of particular features in each of them. But I would be more than happy to take your suggestions. So if you have somewhere that I didn't mention here, since I only talked about 5 and there are hundreds, or 100 and something, I think. But yes, if you have a recommendation of somewhere that you think I would really be interested in going to, let me know the country and the attraction, location that you think I would really like. Please leave it in the comments. I'd be really happy. So going forward, I am going to get back on track with doing them every week. I missed the last 2 weeks, but I'm excited to be back and doing this weekly again. I love to share all my, I love sharing travel stories and tips and tricks, bucket list things. I'm going to expand my travel related content, so stick around. Like, comment, and subscribe. I get really excited every time I see a new subscriber on this channel, and I'm really excited that you're here. If there's any travel related content that you specifically would like to see from me, feel free to put it in the comments and I will try to make a video on it sometime. Anyways, thank you so much for coming and watching this episode of Sarah's Grand Adventures on my bucket list items. I'm so happy you're here. Bye.